You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we focus on financial strategies for building a profitable food business. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Felice Thorpe. She is the founder of Felice Foods, through which she provides sales director consulting services. Felice has strong roots in American agriculture and began her career over 20 years ago as director of business development for an organic grains company. She then moved on to become national sales director for O Olive Oil, where she gained placement into Target and Walmart and served as sales director for many of our favorites, including Point Reyes Farmstead Cheese, Chenel, Marin and St. Benoit Creamery, where she achieved exporting cheese to Asia and expanding national distribution. Felice is joining me today to talk about the importance of having a clear mission, vision, and value statement for your business and the financial impacts it can have on your business, both internally and externally. Let's get to it. Hey, Felice, thank you so much for joining me in conversation today.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here.
I am excited to talk about the topic of mission, vision, and values, because while I think business owners in the good food space come to their business with a mission, vision, and a set of values in mind, because they're very purpose-driven business owners, I'm not sure how many of them think about the financial benefits of having a clear mission, vision, and values and how they can leverage them. So I'm super excited to talk about that with you today.
My perspective is coming from a sales director perspective. So I'm not a branding expert or, an HR professional. It's really comes from a sales perspective, which is absolutely financial.
Yeah, totally. And as I mentioned in the intro, you have a long history of expanding and growing sales for agricultural brands. And through your career, really became an expert in the dairy category, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Can you share with us a little bit about your work and then how mission, vision, and values came to be such an important part of it?
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm in Marin County, California, and my family still lives there. And just always really surrounded. We literally had a cow named Bessie, and was really surrounded by the bounty of California and all of what it had to offer. And it just drew me into selling great California food products. It started with an organic grain company. I moved into a great olive oil company, launched that brand into Target and Walmart, and then fell in love with the dairy industry and I've been working primarily in dairy ever since.
Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit offline about the impact of the growing sort of dairy alternate, or I don't know, I can't remember the proper term, alt dairy, if you will, industry growing and how that has played a little bit of a part in this as well. Can you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
Yeah. So it's been, honestly, the alternative dairy space started in the 1950s, just to kind of backtrack a little bit with margarine. So margarine is actually made with vegetable oil. So it's a plant-based dairy, you could call it. It's not very hip now, but it really was sort of the first thing. And then in the 1970s, soy milk became really popular, and that's still the number one alternative dairy product sold. The category leader is soy milk. And now, of course, we have almond milk and cashew butter and cashew cheese and all of those plant-based dairy products. And those have really been emerging very quickly in the past 2 years, I would say. And it has affected my career because I sit on the conventional dairy side of artisanal cheese and artisanal milk and butter and ice cream. And so I started to notice about 2 years ago, it really creeping into my category that I sold, especially the yogurts. That was pretty impactful. Some really, big brands, a lot of venture capital money in this category, and plant-based protein in general, obviously the meats as well. So But the real aha moment I had was less than 2 years ago. And that's when I started to pay attention to the messaging that the plant-based protein companies did so well. And that was they really led with mission, vision, and values as their, company brand.
Yeah.
And that was, Sarah, my kind of aha moment where as I'm like, I have to do something really quickly and understand what this means to sell the product effectively that I want to sell.
Yeah. And you work with some really well-known brands in the dairy space, right? Currently and in your previous work, names like, Marin French and, Saint Benoit, and all of these really amazing brands who are doing good, right? Who are
Yeah,
mission driven and have really great values in the traditional dairy space. And so, I think there's a place for everyone. And
sure.
everyone's body has different, needs and preferences. But I really appreciate, that you are coming from a place of supporting these, family owned businesses, in many cases, smaller businesses, smaller producers, and really championing this for
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah, it's an important part of California history and California agriculture. And it's not the cow, it's the how.
yeah. Oh, I love
Truly.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's really about how is the cow treated? How is the cow fed? What is the life cycle of the cow like? What is the quality? Are there pesticides being used? Growth hormones being used? So all of that is really important to me.
Yeah.
And the quality of the dairy products is really important. And I do feel like there is a place for that. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a great place to be, and we are in a state that can support that. So,
Yeah. So let's dive into this a little bit and tell me and our listeners who maybe
yeah.
aren't sure or have maybe a vague understanding of what mission, vision, and values are and why are they important?
Yeah. So they're three different things, and they're three equally important things. And we'll take the first one, which is mission. A mission is a statement that's an overall goal or purpose of the company. So um, it's kind of the most communicated of these three, but it's kind of the overall goal. A vision statement is an inspirational long-term goal. So it doesn't even have to necessarily be achievable. It's inspirational, right? So it's like, I have this beautiful inspirational faux background, and that's the Golden Gate Bridge. Maybe it's been tweaked, photoshopped or whatever, but that's the vision statement. Entrepreneurs and business owners, it's really important to innovate and dream. So that's the vision statement. The value statement is the soul of your company, or what you consider the golden rule. So the golden rule would be your total non-negotiable. Like, this is our value. We are not going to, ever cross that line. So those are three really different things. And it takes a long time to develop those statements, but it's important that it's done.
And when we're developing these statements, is like, who are they for? Are they for ourselves as leaders of our businesses? Are they for our customers? Are they for our team? Or is it an all of the above kind of thing?
Yeah, it is. It's all of the above. So I have mission, vision, and value statements for me personally. I'm happy to share them, but it's really for my own personal use. If you're a company, they would definitely be statements that are communicated. They should be communicated. You can have personal statements and you can have company statements as well. So it really just depends on, what the purpose is, but the audience is, most of the time, if you're a company, it's your consumer.
And why does your consumer and your audience need to be aware of this? Like, can't you just have amazing branding and, sell your product successfully? Why does this matter so much?
Well, branding is about values.
Mm.
And branding is sort of, what do people say about your brand when you're not in the room? If I'm representing a brand, I want to walk out of the room and have people be like, wow, we really respect that brand. And there's some iconic brands that do that really well and that communicate that really well. Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some that are just do a phenomenal job. And so, yeah, branding, mission, vision, values are all intertwined.
I love that you bring that up. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with Katie Melezova for sure. And I don't remember if it was the 3 pillars of building a successful food business, but she really zeroes in on those things and how they do fit in and are necessary pieces of your brand. So I love that you echo that. It's so great, I think, for people to be reminded of that even if you start your business with very clear mission, vision, and values for yourself, it's so important to make sure that comes through your brand and also internally for your team. So everybody in your business knows what you stand for, right? Like you mentioned Patagonia. And I think, yeah, and everything they do, right? When you see a press release or you see an article about that company, you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense for them. That is who they are, right? Everything aligns.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a financially focused
Yeah.
podcast. We are talking about mission, vision, and values. So I have to ask, how do they affect your company financially? How do we connect these two ideas of money and these statements?
Well, I see them as sort of a interior and exterior way that they affect your company financially. The interior would be your employees and your staff, and brands that are purpose driven have happier employees. I mean, there have been studies on this most recently because it's such a hot topic. And employees who report that their company leads with a special meaning or purpose are 4 times as likely to stay there and work harder. So that's an immediate internal financial impact, is you have employee retention, which is, benefits any company.
Yeah.
The exterior financial impact is that, especially with Generation Z, which is our new up and coming, really important specialty food consumer, purpose-driven companies are really important to them, and they do a phenomenal amount of research on brands that they buy. I mean, everything is at their fingertips, right? So if they're getting a pop-up ad on Instagram, they're able to, within seconds see, like, what does this brand stand for? Am I aligned with them? And that's really important to them. And that is, that could make or break a brand financially. So there's an internal and an external reason why this is important. And P.S., defining these statements, it's free. So we're not even talking about, there's no money you need to spend as a company or as a person to do this, because it's a totally free thing.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up, like a specific segment, right? Of a consumer segment for this industry that we speak to, right? This good food industry, because it's so true. It's something we have to keep in mind, right? Our audience is maybe changing in age and how they think about food, how they think about anything that they buy is quite different, for example, than how my parents maybe think about what they're buying, right? And how they choose the brands that they purchase. I feel like my generation is sort of in the middle, right? When I hit my late 20s, early 30s, it was like, wait a second, what am I consuming and why am I consuming it? Interestingly, folks who've listened to some of the early episodes of this podcast know that my journey into the food industry started because of really bad acne that oddly enough came from eating too much soy. So I feel like this is sort of an interesting conversation, because like for my body, it just wasn't good, right? My journey was really turning towards these producers in the good food space, and many of whom you've worked with and for over the years. So it feels very full circle for me. And so I'm just really, I'm really enjoying this and also learning from you. So Can we dive into, in a little bit more detail, maybe the internal financial benefits about this? Because something you had mentioned to me was, the Great Resignation, right? This is happening as we are
Mm-hmm.
recording this
Mm-hmm.
podcast episode. And you talked about employee retention being 4 times greater than,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got clear mission, vision, and values. Is there anything else you want to share with us, or any examples of perhaps a business that does have something in place and they're able to retain their employees?
Yeah. So I love this example of Legos, and I'm always looking outside. I kind of have like a vision board or a mood board of companies that I respect, and many of them are outside the food industry. Even though I work in that industry, I feel like best business practices, branding, company values can come in all kinds of CPG or,
Yeah.
other brands. So one of the companies that I'm fascinated by is Legos, and they have recently divested a division that was a kind of a video gaming division, because they got so much negative feedback internally from their team and externally from consumers, that they felt like it didn't align with what Lego's mission was, which was, for children to be interactive and play with the toys instead of sitting in front of a video game.
Yeah.
So that's a company that really made, potentially a huge financial sacrifice to give up a whole part of their business, because they listened to their employees and listened to their consumers and made that decision.
That's such an interesting and great example, I think. And also in there, I'm hearing, trying new things, and you think, well, oh, this is an opportunity, right? Like, there was a Lego movie, 2 of them, I
Sure.
believe, right? And when there's movies, there's often video games that go along with that. So it seems like, oh, strategically, this all makes perfect sense. Then refocusing on that mission, vision, value, go, oh, wait a second. We don't want people to be, kids in particular, to be sitting in front of the TV screen. We want them to be playing with our toys. I just think it's such a great example. And also, for the mission, vision, values, but also you can try things and change your mind, right? Refocus afterward.
Yeah.
But if you have a solid understanding of the mission, vision, values in the first place, then that maybe that video game arm never happens, right? And perhaps you save a lot of money in the long run by not launching it and then pulling it back in.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a fluid process. And that is what's so great about defining these statements, is you can change them.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there's many companies that took these past 18 months as an opportunity to change those statements or even build them for the first time. Another really well-known example of a company changing their branding, which goes back to their mission, vision, values, is Apple Computers not that long ago. And they removed the computers from their name because they realized that it kind of limited them, and oh my gosh, look at all of the products they make, right? They don't
Yeah.
just make computers. And part of a tagline in ad campaign that they had was "Think Different." And that was actually pulled when the advertising agency put this campaign together. They actually pulled that tagline from their mission statement. So they went to Apple's mission statement, kind of researched it, studied it, and then they said, hey, we like these keywords and we
Yeah.
think that this is something that this company stands for. Obviously, it is in their mission statement, and we're going to use it in their advertising campaign. So when you are developing these 3 statements, the potential goes so much farther than you can even imagine.
Such a great example. And internally, when you've got these very clear statements and your team knows about them, when they're thinking about bringing new ideas to the table, or one of the values that we have at our business is to always be thinking about how we can do things differently and better. We don't have just one tool that we say, okay, this is the tool and this is it forever. We receive information from the variety of clients that we have and say, oh, that had this idea, during a meeting. And I think we can improve this tool, not just for this one particular client, but for everyone. And when the people in our team, I believe, know that it's okay. And in fact, it's celebrated for you to improve and change and modify these core things that we're using, they're more likely to bring ideas to the table.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, Starbucks coffee, well, it was Starbucks coffee
Right.
and they removed the coffee. You know what I mean? So like big companies that know what they're doing do this all the time and they
Yeah.
get it and they understand how to innovate and change is you have to be agile to be successful and don't be shy about building these statements and in 18 months or 2 years reevaluating it and looking at them and thinking, do these still fit our path? I mean, do these still make sense to us? If they do, keep them. If they
Yeah.
don't, change them.
Yeah.
That's just part of growth.
I love that too. And now I'm curious because, as a sales director and the work you're doing now with various brands, I kind of want to get into your sales mind.
Mhm.
And maybe you can share with our listeners who, they're founders, they're probably also the lead salesperson in
Yeah.
their company, right? How can they take this information and utilize it when they are perhaps selling their product or attempting to sell their product to a new retail partner? Any advice or insights
Mhm.
that you can provide?
So candidly, in the last year, while I've been working with brands, I'm actually leading with their mission statement
Mm,
when I make a presentation. I've never done this before. And at first it felt really kind of touchy-feely and weird to me that I was doing this, but I'm so convinced that this is the right thing to do. So Kroger, for example, their mission statement is something along the lines of don't buy anything we wouldn't buy ourselves. Like don't bring anything in that we're not going to purchase ourselves. So that's kind of the basic mission statement of theirs. So when I had a presentation, I told them, oh, this is I know that this is your mission statement. And the company that I was working for, this is our mission statement. And it was just kind of, and the buyer was sort of like, oh, okay, wow, that. Like, that's great. Like, it was a totally different, not off putting, but it was like a different way to start a sales conversation. And by the way, I like to call them conversations. I don't like to call them presentations because I really do feel like they should be a conversation. So I kind of like presentation kind of, I'm not a fan of that word. Um, but I'll have a conversation with anyone. I mean, that's a great thing. So Kroger, the conversation that I had with them, I led with that. And I've been doing that ever since. And I really encourage your listeners to lead with that because not only is it kind of a cool, different way to kick off a conversation, you're just checking them and making sure that you're aligned. Like you don't want to do business with people that you don't believe in, right? So it's a two-way street. It's like, yes, you want them to bring in your product, but you also want to be well represented and know that your businesses are aligned. So I would try leading with that.
I love that advice
Yeah.
across.
Transparency is so important, just like in any relationship. And a sales conversation is a relationship. And
Yep.
so it's like going into dating somebody and you're like, hey, I'm monogamous. You don't have to be. But if you aren't, please tell me because I want the choice to have that information. It's just a respectful conversation, is what it is. When you do that check with your customer, like, hey, these are our mission, vision, and values. How does this sound to you? Can you support that? That's really important from the start because it just kind of opens up that whole transparency that makes that relationship so much better.
Yeah. And I know for business owners, it can be really hard to not be super optimistic, especially in the early days of the business, right? You think any sale that I can get is a good sale. I want that revenue to come through the door. I would think in the long run, being critically thinking, being really open and honest, right? During those conversations, when you're thinking about partnering with another business or another brand, it's really the best thing that you can do for yourself. And if you're not clear on who is right to align your brand with, it'll become clear through those honest conversations over time. And that's just going to help
Totally.
you in the end.
And I always tell my brands, don't forget there's 50 million people in California.
Yeah.
It is the size of the country of New Zealand. I promise you, there is an audience there for your product. You know what
Yes.
I mean? It's
Yes.
really, you really have to find the right audience and the right consumer. But we have such a huge population. I mean, you could practically not even sell outside the state and, still be financially solid. So, another great brand that really hasn't compromised this is Ben and Jerry's.
Mhm.
And they are a very, very well articulated, purpose driven company. They're actually now owned by Unilever, which is probably one of the world's largest consumer packaged goods companies. But the CEO of Unilever says that Ben and Jerry's strong environmental and social purpose has been so beneficial for that brand that he is mandating that all Unilever brands become purpose-driven companies. So,
Wow.
yeah, Ben and Jerry's has actually grown 69% faster than any other Unilever brand. And they
Wow.
have, like I said, they're very purpose-driven. They are not a brand for everyone. They're very, have very strong political statements, environmental statements, et cetera, all of that. So it can be done.
Yeah. Thinking about, it's obvious the benefits of having clear statements internally, and we've talked about those a bit from a sales perspective, and a branding perspective. We've talked about that. Are there any other like roles or external avenues of communication where maybe people aren't thinking about, sharing this information that they should be?
Well, definitely social media.
Mm.
That especially with Gen Z, I mean, Instagram, TikTok, if you do that, all of those platforms should be used for communicating. I mean, I look at social media communication as kind of like in thirds. So a third is something personal about the company. A third is something sort of visionary and attractive. And then a third could be your mission, vision, and values. So I would take 1/3 of your social media communication and talk about what do you stand for? What are your values? What is your vision of the world? What is your vision of, the environment or, whatever your mission,
Yeah.
however it resonates with your mission, but
Yeah.
definitely communicate it. People, I mean, honestly, young consumers respect that and they understand it.
Yeah. So I want to bring the conversation back to something we talked about in the beginning, and that was sort of the plant-based dairy versus what I'm going to call traditional dairy.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned that a real eye-opening or aha moment for you was when you realized that the messaging was so focused on mission, vision, and values for those types of brands. And I just wonder if you might share with us, what did you take from that? And maybe how did you implement it with the businesses that you were working with, or any advice for brands who are listening to kind of maybe do better or learn a lesson like similar to what you did in this instance?
So I know there's a lot of fear around pricing
Mm,
and being overpriced, and brands not feeling like they're priced well enough for the marketplace. If you take a look at the plant-based protein category, that blows every one of those assumptions out of the water.
yeah.
Like there is no way you could think that. So, and I'm talking meats, fluid milk, cheese, butter, every plant-based protein by ounce. If you look at the good quality version in the dairy or the meat space, it's about 4 times more expensive per ounce, the plant-based product. I feel like that really needs to be communicated with the smaller brands in general, because there is so much fear around pricing. Our price needs to be lower. Our price needs to be lower. It's like Chicken Little, right? The
Yeah.
sky is falling. The sky is falling. But they've done that. The plant-based protein space has done this so successfully that those consumers don't even look at the price. Honestly, they don't. And the buyers don't look at the price. I mean, I have friends that are buyers at Whole Foods or other national conventional specialty retailers, and they say that the target audience that's buying those products aren't looking at the price.
Right.
Okay, so we know they're not looking at the price. We know it's not necessarily flavor driven, right? Because between you and me, like I like cheese better than cashew cheese. Like in general, I think it tastes better. So, and I'm not a big meat eater, but my husband is, and he's a fan of like a really good quality organic steak, right? So, and we've tried plant-based meats, and he would concur that he thinks the steak is better tasting. So what is it? Well, it is the mission, vision, and values, because that's what they're communicating so well. To me, that's like the X factor in this. That is the big miss that a lot of brands are not picking up on.
Yeah. So interesting. I mean, price, especially over the last 12 months, maybe even just like 6 to 8, really, it's such a big conversation, such a common conversation. And you're absolutely right. Good food business owners are scared. They are scared to raise their price because they are afraid of what the wholesale buyer is going to say. They're afraid of what their end consumer is going to say. And from my point of view, we need to protect the financial sustainability of your business. And if this is the price that your product needs to be sold at, then that's what we have to do. I think, it's a conversation for another day, but we need to break this belief that food is cheap, right? People in the good food space are paying fair wages to their employees, right? What the owners of good food businesses want people throughout the supply chain, throughout the value chain, to be paid well. And that means a higher cost to you as a business, and thus a higher price to your end consumer. But you're doing so much good in the world. If people understand that, like you're saying, they will be willing to pay. But it's helping your consumer or the buyer at the wholesale store to understand it and to believe in it, right? And buy into it. I think that's the other piece as well. You can't just have them and keep them close to the cuff. Something I'm learning from you today is like they need to be out there in your messaging and in your communication and in your conversations.
I totally agree. Pricing is scary, but Danone's CEO, they're a huge French company, but make a ton of yogurt in the US, predicted their price increase due to inflation this year, well, in 2022 will be about 8%. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And the brands that I'm talking to are considering a price increase of 3 to 5%. And they have a much smaller margin than Danone. I guarantee it. I agree. Like, I want our industry to come to some kind of consensus. Let's accurately and fairly increase our product to meet with inflation and meet with what all the big companies are going to be doing.
For us in this space, those of us who are consulting, those of us who are supporting good food business owners, the business owners themselves, like we have a hard job to do, but I believe that it can be done. And I believe that we can change our food industry. And I think that what you're trying to teach people and help people understand about mission, vision, and value is going to help to create that change and to move things in the right direction. So thank you for this work and sort of highlighting or spotlighting these statements for us.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about it. I think we're so fortunate to be working in this industry that this kind of communication is valued and important, and it's becoming more and more important. Like I said, it's a free exercise to do. So it's definitely something everyone should be doing.
Yeah. And you've got some resources to help people with this process of, I believe, identifying these statements and more. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and the resources you're offering? And of course, we'll link to all of them in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I was asked by a dairy group to do a workshop presentation on defining these statements. And I built a workbook for the presentation, which I will happily share for free. It's literally like fill in the blanks workbook, super, super easy. Talks more in depth about which one of these statements are, why they're important, gives some good kind of case study examples of different companies that have used them in different ways. I'm happy to share that. My email is Felice Thorpe at icloud.com. So just shoot me an email. I'll send it back to you. And yeah, that's what I've been working on currently with this topic.
Amazing. I shared a little bit in the intro about the work that you're doing now, but tell folks about the consulting work that you're doing these days in case we've got some dairy good food business owners listening
Yeah,
who may
thank
want to
you.
seek your support. Of course.
Yes. So what happened was a couple years ago, I had people every once in a while, they'd come to me and they'd say like, "Hey, can you help me with this project? Can you, I need just a part-time person or an advisor on this." And I never had time to do it because I had a full-time job. So I thought, well, gosh, if I put, like every consultant thinks eventually, if I put all of these people together, that's a full-time job. So that's what I ended up doing. My business is called Felice Foods, and I'm a sales director consultant. So mostly sales strategy. I do a lot of advising on sales strategy, everything from developing presentations to really coming in with an outsider perspective, like a fresh set of eyes looking at a company and having so much experience with retail. I've actually worked for a distributor as well. So I understand the distribution side of business, which in perishables is extremely scary and time sensitive, as you can imagine. So yeah, helping companies, whatever their priorities are that are sales related.
Amazing. So I know they can learn more about your consulting services at felicefoods.com. And then you shared your email address, which again, we'll link and share this information in the show notes as well. Felice, I've so enjoyed this conversation today. You've opened my eyes to some new things and some new ways of thinking about mission, vision, and values. And I so appreciate that. And thank you so much for spending an hour or so with me.
Yeah, thank you for doing what you do, Sarah. It's super important. And yeah, it all comes down to, I feel like aside from the CFO, I think the sales director shoulders a lot of the financial responsibility of a brand. And I take that very seriously.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Felice. Have an amazing day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.